Good afternoon. I'm Howard Glazer, Director of State Operations for the State of New York. This is New York State's $70 million train to nowhere. There's not a better example of state government dysfunction that was inherited by Governor Cuomo than these obsolete and rotting trains that have sat here decaying since 2004. It's time to put a stop to these shocking examples of waste and incompetence that have characterized New York State government for a decade. The governor's message to state agencies: we have zero tolerance for this kind of waste. Let me tell you a little bit about these trains, how they came to be in this field. Trains behind me and stretching down as far as the eye can see were originally built in 1976. They were the only 7 trains of this type, 7 of them were made in the United States. They're not typical in the United States. These are turbo liner engines. That's not typically what we have in the Amtrak system. In 1998, the state announced that they would acquire these trains, rehabilitate them, renovate them as high-speed rail trains, and run a service between Albany and New York City. The program was to cost $185 million to rehab and run these 7 trains. 3 trains ultimately were rehabilitated in some state or other. By 2002, the program was in disrepair. Never really ran. They ran for a short period of time, but they were plagued with problems. The engineering wasn't done properly. The track work to allow the trains to run wasn't done. The trains were incompatible with the rest of Amtrak's system because they were the only trains of their type. They need special parts. The air conditioning didn't work. You can imagine on a day like this. And so in 2002, they effectively scrapped any further work on the trains, argued about it for a couple of years till 2004, and in 2004 formally terminated the high-speed rail program in New York State. Amtrak took, of the 7 trains, they towed 3 of them, the ones that had been most rehabilitated, down to Delaware. These 4 trains behind me stayed with the state of New York. And you can see, although some of the trains on my left are not in a complete set, the ones on my right are in complete sets, and a set is actually 2 locomotives, 1 in each direction so they could run it back and forth from Albany to New York without having to turn it around, a cafe car in the middle usually, and 2 passenger cars. 5-car trains. We have 4 sets, so there are 20 rolling stock vehicles that are out here right now. Storing these trains since 2004 and the parts that go with them, it's cost about $150,000 a year to put these here, along with the parts, and there are a lot of parts. We're going to show you in a little while, those of you that want to come to the warehouse, there are 100 tractor trailer loads of parts made specifically for these trains sitting unused in a warehouse 10 minutes from here. By the end of the day, the state had spent $70 million on these trains and their parts, trains that can't be used, and hundreds of thousands of dollars to store them. It's not clear these can ever be used. They're unique, as I said earlier. They're not really compatible with Amtrak's system, and as you can see very clearly, and when you get up closer you'll see, they're basically rusting hulks at this point. The governor has directed the state of New York to dispose of these trains in the most efficient manner possible. The Office of General Services will be engaging an expert consultant and contractor who brokers this kind of technology and equipment to evaluate it and come up with a plan for disposing of this and getting some money back for the taxpayers, whatever we can, by the end of this year. Ultimately, as you'll see the condition of these trains may have to be sold for scrap at pennies on the dollar. Today, these trains may be the most expensive planters in the world. You can see there are weeds that are actually growing right through them. Obsolete almost from the day that this program began. For the past year and a half, we've embarked on a mission to rid New York State government of waste. We've been consolidating operations, consolidating agencies, surplusing equipment and cars. You know, on eBay, we've sold over $1 million worth of cars and other equipment. We'll continue to fight waste and abuse and make sure taxpayers get their money's worth. No more trains to nowhere. New York State today has embarked on a different kind of high-speed rail program, a different approach to improving service. Today, right now, there are 7 major projects underway on the railways in New York State, all along the main line to produce tangible results, improve reliability, speed, and on-time performance. That includes a double track from Albany to Schenectady, which is very close by to where we're standing now, the double track system. There's only a single track that runs from Albany to Schenectady. So all of the east-west traffic running back and forth across the state to points east and points west has to stop when a train comes through, wait 20 minutes for the train to come through, and then start and put another train through. Whole East Coast gets stopped that way. Similar problems with congestion down in New York City. We have $500 million in federal funding that we've been successful in getting to improve those railways and create tangible results to speed these trips. Give you an idea of how far we've come or not come. In 1831, New York State ran its first passenger service. The third locomotive ever built in the U.S. was the DeWitt Clinton. Ran not far from here, from Albany to Schenectady in August of 1831. Trip took 38 minutes that day. Today, that trip takes 24 minutes. Not a tremendous improvement. And plagued by delays because the rail improvements haven't been done. That's what we're changing now. Create a better system for New Yorkers, end the waste, and improve the government's performance for taxpayers. We're going to go, I think, and take a look at the trains. So those of you who haven't been on them, we actually can go inside. It's a little cramped, so we'll have to go in one by one. These trains have not been opened up. These are like a time capsule. In fact, when I came here, I first heard about these trains. We had put out a missive to our state agencies asking them what kind of equipment and surplus, what wasn't being used. This was one of the things that came back. I came out here myself. I couldn't get in the trains because they were all boarded up. So we opened them up this morning for the first time, and I think this is the first time in 20 years, or 10 years, that anybody's been on these trains, some of these trains, as you'll see from the time capsule inside. So with that, I don't know if we want to do questions here, Rich, or I can just do them one-on-one as we walk. It might be easier than doing them outside.
Yeah, I have a question. So they've basically been here since 2004, you indicated?
Yeah, 2004.
Was it a refusal of past state officials to recognize the reality that it's a waste of money, or?
You know, I wish I could say this is the first and sole example of incompetent government and dysfunctional government that we've discovered since Governor Cuomo took office last year. But the fact is that's been a pattern of a lack of management responsibility for a better part of a decade in New York. And I think they took their eye off the ball. It was somebody else's job. They weren't bothering anybody out here, and the state continued to spend $150,000 a year to store these year in and year out until we put a stop to it today.
Howard, in your view, should the state never have embarked on such ambitious project refurbishing trains?
I'll leave that to the railway experts. It was well-intentioned. No one can argue that it was extremely poorly executed, as you can see by the results behind me.
Howard, you mentioned these trains probably have to go to scrap. What about the stuff in the warehouse? Is any of that sellable as is?
We're going to evaluate that. It's obviously in better condition because it hasn't been sitting outside exposed to the elements for several years. But it's highly unique equipment also. It was equipment and material designed specifically for these trains for which there's no market. So how can the material and equipment that's there be reused and the machinery there for something else? As an example of what's out there, I mentioned these are turbine engines, which are not common in trains in the United States today. They are common in helicopters. So the state purchased 7 or 8, I think the number is, turbine helicopter engines to use as spare parts for these turbines. Because if these turbines ever wear out, there's no replacement for them. So they bought these $750,000 each helicopter turbine engines that are sitting in the warehouse. There may be a reuse for those. Perhaps we get some money back on that waste of taxpayer dollars, and that's what we're going to work on.
I may have missed it, but why were they incompatible?
For a number of different reasons. First, these are turbo engines, not used anywhere else in the Amtrak system. So in order to maintain them and have a system of parts, you'd have to have almost its own system that would run back and forth. People need to be specially trained. That was one problem. Engineering was another one. They just didn't work well. They run at very high temperatures. They were prone to fires. And as I mentioned, the air conditioning didn't work, so you couldn't even deliver a good experience for the customer on the train.